Live from the Colorado Festival of Horror. Smurf here with a legend. And I cannot believe he is here. This, to everyone, is just Dean Gates.
Yes.
But to a lot of fans, you are so much more. And let me just crack the surface on this for everyone at home. If you're unaware of Dean Gates has done Eyes of the Stranger, Day of the Dead, Invasion USA, Raw Deal, Maximum Overdrive, Blue Velvet, Dracula's Widow?
Yeah, Sylvia Christel from Emmanuel.
I liked her.
Joseph Summer and Lenny Van Dolen.
The Terror Within, The Return of Swamp Thing, which I wish you would have been part of the first Swamp Thing. That probably would have made that film a little bit better. Manic Cop 2, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Best of the Best 2, Jurassic Park, Phantasm, and of course, probably more Star Trek titles and credits than we have time for. My God, Dean, you are a living legend.
Well, in my own mind, definitely, and I'm glad I can. It's great coming to conventions and places like this. The 300 people that might think you're somebody, maybe half of them might be here,
right?
And you feel it's a wonderful feeling to share that and do that. And then you're regular guy in the rest of your life, because most people, when they maybe find out you've done something. A great majority of people, you say, "Oh, I worked on Star Trek," or I worked on horror films. They go, "Oh, I'm not a Star Trek fan." I mean, they want to tell you what they're not right away. I mean, as if just talking to me makes them look like they're
don't get any on.
Don't get close to me. Oh, I don't like horror. Oh, those horror films. You work on those? Ooh, So it's great to come here and talk to folks that love it, or specifically maybe you've seen some of your films that you've worked on, and ask you very specific questions. It's really a treat, because in everyday life that doesn't happen.
No, because I mean, and especially with the Star Trek fans, the closet ones, they're the first ones to say, "Oh no, I don't like Star Trek," or immediately, "No, I'm a Star Wars fan." I don't want to admit to the Star Trek, but I mean, the horror is its own little weird world. How did you get into horror? Was it your first start, or did you start on the sci-fi world and just kind of cross over?
Well, I was interested when I was a kid. I discovered, I grew up when I was aware, watching TV, and first time you stay up late to watch something in the middle of the night, back before the days of streaming and cable and home video. The only way you saw a movie was you went to the movie theater or you saw it on TV. Well, when Universal Studios released the Shock Theater package to local stations, the studios would print 16mm prints and send them out all over the country, and a station would show a 16mm print on a film chain, and they had all the classic original Frankenstein and Dracula and Wolfman, and I started seeing those like either Friday night or Saturday night, a suburb of Washington, D.C., and they would have a horror host come on, and he would, usually they had a guy piped in from out of town, Sir Graves Ghastly. I think he might have been out of Philadelphia, but then they finally got a local guy, Dick Dizell, who at Channel 39, it was the UHF station in Bethesda, Maryland. I believe it was Bethesda, Maryland. He would be Bozo in the morning, not the original Bozo, but they licensed Bozo. He played Bozo in the morning and have a Bozo show. And then in the afternoons, he did Captain 20, where later he would do Star Trek and sci-fi stuff. And then on late night, on Friday or Saturday night, he was Count Gore Duvall, the pasty makeup and the drawn in widow's peak, and he would show, be very campy, and they would show the horror films. So I would always stay and watch those. I mean, it's just like, well, what are they going to show next? What are they going to show next? And so I got a love for those classic Universal films.
Right.
And then at one point, he had a contest by the time I got into high school, I was doing more trying to duplicate makeups, and my friends and I were doing little 8mm Super 8 movies, even as early as junior high, or what they call middle school today, like around 8th grade, doing stop motion animation, laying more hair in the hand and making like a Wolfman hand grow, or doing little miniatures in front of a Lazy Susan, paper mache, mountains going by, and hanging your little spacecraft on a wire and making, doing that. So we were making our little movies, and I made my sister up to look like Linda Blair from The Exorcist. Exorcist had just been out for a few years, and I submitted it for the Monster of the Week contest. And Count Gordeval was hosting this Monster of the Week, and you would come in and host a show with him for maybe a couple of months. He was going to do this. Well, my sister, she won, and I brought her in, and I made her up. And it was the first time I ever saw some kind of a professional studio. And all the things I saw on my TV and the old, pre-high definition televisions, it looked like these candelabras and a casket and a castle and stone walls. It was all made out of cardboard. The candelabras were mailing tubes with little tea lights on the top, and I thought, wow, this stuff looks pretty cheap. And there was the Bozo set pushed to the side,
just,
and there was
just on casters thrown in the corner.
It was like, wow. And so he was shooting maybe 5 or 6 Gordeval Count Gordeval shows in one day, and there was all these other people there in different costumes. But he saw my sister. He was like, he was in character the whole time, going like, "Oh, welcome, come on in, whatever." And he saw my sister, and he was like, "Whoa!" He goes, "Hey, kid, how'd you do this?" He was like, so I got my kind of first validation that I was maybe doing something from reading all the, at the time, only books in the library, Richard Corson's theater makeup book, or looking at Life magazine pictures of Dick Smith doing Little Big Man and using a magnifying glass going, "What's that on his show? How's he doing that?" And then talking about how foam rubber's made and things. I hadn't yet made foam rubber, but for appliances, but I was working with mortician's wax and ordering things, and there was a makeup supply place in DC we drive into. I think it supplied strippers or something for the strip clubs, but I would get their latex and goober and things like that. So I was starting to do stuff, and I realized, oh, this guy thinks I'm did something kind of fun. And then so that was my intro, just like scary movies, how they were done. I like the the stories, the macabre, interesting stuff. And my mom used to always say, "You better stop watching that stuff or you're going to get a warped mind." So anyway, and Mom, bless her heart,
led to a long-lasting career.
A long-lasting career, and with my warped mind or not. So anyway, that was where things kind of got started. And I went to college, started studying engineering. Really wasn't digging that very much, and I had a drama professor that I was doing mountain youth drama. We did these old folk tales and stuff in the Southwest Virginia at the small school I was at. Well, they got a contract from the local PBS station to be the performers for doing these folk tales and stuff. And I started applying my makeup knowledge to those things and doing more. And that was the first time I had my stuff filmed and with film cameras, and professional. It was PBS, but they had nice production value. And my drama professor said, "Hey man," he said, why don't you go study movie making, whatever. And I go, "Wow, that sounds like a good thing." So I transferred down to the University of Miami and started studying film production. And all my student films involved horror or sci-fi or some kind of fantastical. And it was at that time I had an internship on a small movie Ken Wiederhorn was directing, who is known for Shockwaves, Underwater Nazi Zombies, King Frat, which was a knockoff of Animal House, which had just come out. And we were getting ready to do a little, psychological thriller with Jennifer Jason Leigh in her first movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was very young, and Lauren Tweez, who played Julie, the ship's director, social director on Love Boat, Love Boat. She was there. And we had John DeSante playing the killer, who had played the Belushi knockoff part in their King Frat movie, but he was really very intense, very great bad guy. And the producers, I was there, and I saw there's one scene with this little girl that's supposed to look like she's been attacked or whatever. And that was supposed to be Jennifer Jason Leigh's character as a young girl, and she's supposed to look beat up in the hospital, like some guy attacked her and hurt her, and she becomes deaf and can't talk, as an adult. And I said, "Hey, can I show you what I can do with this makeup?" And then I made up the secretary in the office. They go, "Whoa!" And they go, "Well, yeah, you can make up the girl." And that was the first time I think I got paid, $100 or something. And I got my first. I was in college still. I got paid to make someone for a movie. But I went away to spring break, got my first car to bring back to college. An old Toyota. I drove down, got back from Virginia, got back to Miami. I walk in the office, and I hear the guy say, oh yeah, we just saw an advanced screening of this new movie that our producers have put some money into. It's called Friday the 13th. And wow, it was really pretty gory. And we think that's the wave of the future. So we're going to have the guy that did that come down and add about 5 gory scenes to our movie, Tom Savini. I go, Tom Savini? And they go, do you know him? And I go, my God,
Legend.
well, at the time, I had just seen Dawn of the Dead in the theaters.
Right.
Which was just, today you look at it, might think it's a little cartoony, but at the time it was very shocking because of the bloodletting, the exploding heads,
Just the carnage
the
in that.
lady biting, the guy biting the woman and pulling that. You see the white fleshy stuff of the blood coming out. I mean, all of that was just so intense. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. And I had seen Night of the Living Dead several years after it was released when I was in junior high, probably about 6 years earlier, on a double feature with Scars of Dracula at a film festival. So I actually watched old like Hammer films and things, and Night of the Living Dead really, I never thought, oh, I'd never be scared. But I remember Night of the Living Dead, I would go home at night and kind of think about that, and maybe a little sick to the stomach. It was such an intense movie. With the sort of the little girl stabs her mom with the trowel and all that. I remember thinking and it was like shot where I grew up. It wasn't Hollywood. It was like real, the forests of Pennsylvania looked just like the forest of Virginia. And I thought, this kind of looks like it could be here, It's like, it wasn't like some slick Hollywood faraway place. So Tom comes in, and he was really fun, a lot of fun. I mean, really was just, he was, had his red contact lenses in, was always taking off his glasses and scaring people and squirting blood everywhere. And he had Betsy Palmer's separate head from Friday the 13th with her mouth open. He used it as an ashtray, walking around smoking. We didn't see the movie yet, but he's talking about how you do a full head cast. And then he goes, oh, look, I just visited Dick Smith. I knocked on his door, and we all knew Dick Smith is like, we call him the godfather of modern prosthetic makeup, from Little Big Man and Taxi Driver and The Exorcist. And he said, and he gave me all these formulas, how he makes his blood, how he does his bullet hit in the head effects, how he does all these cool formulas and things. He goes, here, just take them back and Xerox them for me. So, so I still have those in a folder today. And that's got me started. So I worked with Tom briefly. Then I went back and started working on student films and say, hey, we shoot people in the head, we do this and that, and we're doing all these great effects. I mean, my level of knowledge grew, got better. And the next thing you know, I'm out working in Miami. I'm a production assistant on Scarface. I'm working as a location scout on Miami Vice. I'm doing editing on commercials. I'm making props for people.
Wow.
I keep saying, hey, I can do makeup effects. Oh, yeah, sure, kid. The kids will
Here, edit this for me.
Yeah, edit this for me, whatever. Well, it started kind of coming around where they go, well, we need to lay like a ventriloquist dummy for this car commercial about how these mechanics don't treat you like a dummy. And I said, well, can we do a progression where she looks more and more like the dummy? They go, oh, that's a great idea. And so you start adding ideas, and we're doing these commercials, and people from New York are coming down. Miami is a big place for doing commercial production. So I started doing more prosthetics and doing foam rubber and learning about that. And lo and behold, a few years later, I get a call from Greg Nicotero, who's Tom's assistant on Day of the Dead, and he goes, oh, hey, Dean, I had on your list here. Tom might have had you be on our full-time crew, but we've got guys up here. But we're coming to Florida. Can you get the other 5 other people? We got to make like 100 or so background zombies up. You guys can do that for this Day of the Dead thing. I go, is anything to do with George? Oh, yes, George Romero's follow-up to Dawn of the Dead. I go, oh, my gosh. I get to work.
Came full circle.
Came full circle.
Wow.
So we were on the set doing that, and that's where I met John Vulich and Everett Burrell, who later formed Optic Nerve. John Vulich was just a master. I saw him blending appliances to the face. I learned tricks about that. We saw their sculpting techniques, coloring. Howard Berger, and of course Nicotero, who later formed KMB several years later after they worked with another fellow I got to know very well, Mark Sjostrom. And so anyway, we all stayed in touch. I worked on the movie. And then a few months later, they called me again. They're coming to Miami to do a Chuck Norris movie because Joe Zito, who's directing, had directed several of the Braddock Missing in Action films, was now doing this bigger Chuck Norris movie because they had this 5-picture contract with Chuck. They wanted to up the budgets, and Dakota Silence had just come out, so now Chuck got these legitimate credits. He's not just a chop sake guy, but he's like a real, action hero.
Right.
So we're doing that movie, and we're just making body parts and things, people getting shot and stuff like that, which was, but it was fun to see huge explosions and shoot 'em ups. And we were at 5 Points in downtown Atlanta, and we were having the 300 National Guard and 20 tanks come up every street. 7 streets come together in one spot every night. We're filming a different one. We're got 300 extras making up all the terrorists, and they're getting blown up. And so it was like a big, now I'm working on this big, big extravaganza. Well, Tom and the rest of the crew had to leave to work on something else. And they said, Dean, here's the rest of the few other gags that need to be done. You just stay here and can do them. And next thing you know, people are talking about this Stephen King movie. It's going to be shot in North Carolina called Maximum Overdrive. And they're looking for someone to do the makeup effects. And the makeup lady on the show, Marlena May, was very gracious to recommend me. She was going to move on and do that movie, and they wanted Tom, or Stephen King directing, wanted Tom to work on it, but it was there wasn't enough makeup effects really to justify him being on the picture. And King thought maybe Tom could also do stunts because he was doing stunts for Romero. And they said, well, no, we got some big stunts going on, and we need to rig some huge things. So we got some other guys doing that,
right?
Like Glenn Randall from Raiders of the Lost Ark and stuff. So we go, okay. So Tom moved on, didn't do anything. So now I'm on Maximum Overdrive, doing Carnage and working with Stephen King, and that was fun. So that's kind of the start. And there's one other quick movie in there. I did a one-off. The Nightmare Weekend was a co-French English by way of a guy from India, was a movie theater owner in England, and American production, shot in Orlando, later got picked up by Troma. Troma didn't produce it, but it was all shot in English with a scratch track, later dubbed in English. What? I know, it was really weird. The French just record like the Italians, they just recorded a scratch track on set. So later, you watch everyone speak, and it's like, Hercules, I beg of you, please don't come down from Mount Olympus. I mean, it's almost like,
that horrible Arnold Schwarzenegger film when they didn't let him talk for Hercules.
Oh, yeah, Hercules in New York. Yeah, that was Howard Stanko. Who was in Mad World. Mad World.
Love that movie.
Yeah.
Love both those movies.
His partner in that, the other guy that ran the gas station, it was Howard Stanko. God, who was the other guy? I worked with him on a commercial where I had to make him into a giant dryer hose. I know, it sounded, well, other people were pieces of wood, saws, and a sprinkler head. Anyway, it was giant props, and I had to do the blending pieces to go into the thing. And Melvin, what's that guy's name? Anyway, great comedic actor. They're the two guys that have the gas station. It's a Mad World.
Right.
Anyway.
Oh.
I get off on tangents, sorry.
No, it was John. It wasn't Jonathan. Jonathan Winters, wasn't it?
He was in there too.
Yeah.
He's one of the main guys that interacts with those guys and tears up. But there's another, the two guys in the white suit, the white ice cream outfits, like, running the gas station.
Yeah.
Howard Stanko and, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I can't remember this guy's name.
I can't remember either.
He got kind of a little mushy face, and he's a great character actor. He's been in tons of things.
Yes.
Like a New York theater guy, anyway.
And I keep seeing Sid Caesar, and I got everybody's.
All those guys were there.
All those guys.
Yeah,
those are such heavy hitters in that film, and I can see, it'll come to me. It's not Buddy Hackett. No.
Buddy Hackett was in there too.
Yeah.
He was one of the main guys. Anyway, we'll figure it out later.
So
people at home are screaming.
Yeah. Well, you know what? If they've seen Mad World, I will just be impressed with that. You can at me all you want. Just thank you for seeing a good film. The Maximum Overdrive that you mentioned, has probably one of my favorite, implied death scenes.
Yes.
As if you haven't watched Maximum Overdrive, killer film. But the machines rise up and overthrow the humans, and there's this scene where a guy is just laying in his front yard with the lawnmower, just munching his head.
Well, it's interesting. Now you're combining a couple of ideas here. The guy is laying there, and the lawnmower has already munched him. We never see it munch.
We never see it, which I wanted to see.
When we pass by him and we see his face, and I wanted to drop his head down in a hole and then have like a fake half head, have his back. And have a fake. We did that they did that in Day of the Dead.
Yeah.
They had the guy on the table with the exposed brain, putting electrodes in it, and then we had the one of the guys had his head dropped down the side of the table, and they put a fake head up there. It was half removed. Right after that, the lawnmower passes him, It goes down a driveway and goes right by the camera. And this was one of the, kind of a tragic thing that happened. Accidents happen, movie sets can be very dangerous places. The lawnmower actually ran into the camera. It was on the ground looking up the driveway. It was a sloped driveway, and they had these wooden wedges that they put under things to raise things up.
Right.
It's, half of a 2x4 cut on a diagonal. The lawnmower was remote controlled. It had a special, some kind of pneumatic system that made it remote controlled, but it also had working blades. And in hindsight, probably you didn't need the blades working as it goes down the driveway, but it was working. And they kept trying to get it to go, and the remote control aspects weren't working too well. About the fourth or fifth or sixth take, oh, it's going down the driveway. Oh, we're going to get the shot. It's going down the driveway. Well, instead of going beside the, right beside the camera, and off camera, it headed right, and it popped up and started eating the matte box of the camera. So that's what you remind me. And it was chewing up the camera. The blades are spinning, and the young Italian assistant cameraman to the Italian camera crew, she puts her leg up and tries to kick the lawnmower away.
Oh my God!
Because her whole thing is save the camera. And Armando, the director of photography, and Armando Nanuzzi, very famous Italian director of photography, did spaghetti western, shot the Jesus of Nazareth. I mean, all these epic Italian shows. He reaches down to grab her and pull her out of the way. And right when he does, fortunately, she didn't get hurt. But then the lawnmower blades hits one of those wooden wedges, and it flies up sideways and lands right across the bridge of the eye and the cheekbone. It doesn't poke into the eye, but it's enough pressure. It didn't poke the eye out, but it jumbled the tissue in the eye, and he lost sight in that eye for the rest of his career.
Oh.
And we were down for a week while they tended to him and air vac him out to wherever they sent him to work on. So that's maybe what you're thinking of is the thing chewing up. And that was an amazing thing, and interesting to see De Laurentiis, what a shrewd producer he was. The whole crew gets paid for a week, do nothing, and we get back up to working again. And I think his son, who was a camera operator, kind of stepped in as director of photography to kind of take over for his dad. And his father showed up later, but with a very red and jumbly tissue-looking eye. But I think there was a lawsuit that happened. It was all off the books, but something happened after that.
Little something, something.
Yeah, little something, something. But he did continue to work on a few more movies. But I think he shot Roger Corman's last directed movie, Hercules. I'm sorry, Hercules. Hercules, big of you. No, Frankenstein Unbound, if you remember that one.
I do remember that one.
With, I believe, Bridget Fonda is in that movie.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yes.
Armando shot that overseas in England or whatever. Anyway, so he did continue to work for a little while longer. But when we got near the end of the movie, we blow up the Happy Toys truck. They get on the ship to sail off. And in the script, they're supposed to continue. They're heading to Ballhead Island, which is a true island in off the coast of Wilmington that has no motor vehicles. It's all golf carts and no heavy giant equipment to run you over.
Right.
So the theory in the movie, and actually I think they say they were going to head to this island, and so they get on the boat. They start heading out, and in the water they're supposed to encounter a self-driving with machine gun Coast Guard cutter that tries to shoot them up on the boat. There's this whole thing with that. We're going to spend a week shooting that, and they finally make it to the island. Well, we get to that point. Dino goes, I paid the crew for a week already where they didn't work. We now have a week left to shoot. Editor, do we have enough to make a movie? Yeah, we got plenty. Okay, we'll just cut that off. We'll end it with them just heading out of the thing. Movie's done. We're back on schedule, back on budget. Thank you very much.
Well, that sucks. So we never got to, because it's very like, which night, Return of the Living Dead, where they get out of the mall and they get to the boat and they go to the island.
The remake of Dawn of the Dead.
Yes.
Yeah.
Totally makes me think of that too.
Yeah, it does. And then you hear the recording of them making it to the island. They're all getting eaten anyway. It's like,
get back to the boat. Yeah, that's how it probably should have been.
You don't get out.
You'd never get out.
You're not going to get out.
What is your favorite prosthetic or your favorite product or
thing I've done?
Yeah.
Couple of things. Maniac Cop 2, because I got to create my own original movie monster. Even though the Maniac Cop 1 was there, we did a whole different design for number 2. It was my design. I had the idea that after 1 happened, and 1 was very minimal. Bob Zadar had very minimal, I think a keloid on his face or something. I said, well, at the end of that movie, he goes in the water. What if he's under the water for a while? He's going to get a little pruned up and whatever, and zombified. So let's do that to him. And then Larry Cohen suggested, oh, I'd like to see a family opera type nose. Maybe his nose is kind of missing or something. So I did the missing nose, and I recreated where all the scars. I watched the original thing where he gets slashed down the jaw and where he got slashed in the throat. So I recreated the slashes, and then I put a couple extra bullet hits because there's some gunfire going on.
Of course.
And then damaged one eye, put a contact lens in, had the great Richard Snell make the contact lenses for me, and I had Corrine Hansen make a beautiful lace wig, which I have down at my table. I have my stand, my pole from the original mold, fiberglass heads on my table down there at the convention, and I actually have the original wig that was worn by Bob Zadar in the movie. So doing that was really great. It's one of those things you say, well, I wish I had gotten the theatrical release it deserved. A great action horror film, probably the best example of action horror of the 80s, 90s. We shot it 89, 90. Spiro Rosatos did all the car chase scenes, who went on now and does the first 5 or 6 Fast and Furious movies before they went to CGI, and does all the chase scenes in the Avenger films. He is an expert, beautifully staged car chase guy. And they put some great stuff in that movie. So that film was great. I got to create my own movie monster. I was really glad I worked on it. And then years later, I tell this story many times, where you put your message in the bottle, you throw it in the ocean, you forget about it, and 25, 30 years later, someone gets on Facebook when you first on there and says, from England, hey, did you work on Maniac Cop 2? I go, yeah, this is my favorite film. They showed that ad nauseum over here in England. We all saw it. We all grew up with it. It was amazing. And I go, wow. For 25 years, 30 years, I thought, well, no one really ever saw the movie.
No?
Great film. Never got.
Are you kidding? I got a copy of it at VHS. I got it sitting right next to Dead Heat.
Yeah.
Those two films are just great.
And my buddy, I mentioned Todd Masters. He did all the effects on Dead Heat. That they got me on Swamp Thing. In fact, I think he was doing Dead Heat about the same time we did Swamp Thing.
I think it would, if I remember my timeline right. Yeah, it's right
somewhere
about
around
that
80,
time.
88, 80, 86, 87. So there's that. I got to do, there's a couple of classic things. I got to do a really great old age progression makeup for a commercial that was for the Florida Bar Association. After I moved to LA, some of the commercial people who I planted my seeds years earlier in Miami, they would call me up, and that's where I went with our actor we can't remember, and did all the garden appliances and tools made into anthropomorphic people makeups. I did that for a company, Filmworks in Florida, and I did an old age for the Florida Bar Association. They had this great actor, Kane Duvall, and he's a young man, and every time we see him, he's saying something negative or crappy about old people, as a young man, as a businessman, as an older guy, and finally he's really old, and he says, I wish I knew then what I know now. And it's like, do not discriminate against the elderly. Call your local. Don't smack an old person office. And
oh my God.
Anyway, so that was cool to do that, and I got to do the whole Megillah with that. That was fun. And then maybe the other thing is, my buddy Mark Sjostrom, we got to work together on Phantasm 3, and Mark's a real heavy hitter, has a big name in the business, and Evil Dead 2 and all the great stuff he did for Charlie Band, and he had done Phantasm 2 with a larger crew, and then he admitted to me, he said, we did more work on Phantasm 3 with only 2 of us, but we had 6 months to prepare. Yeah. So we sat in for 6 months and prep, and Don Coscarelli can really get a lot of production value out of everything. I mean, he makes things look much bigger and more than they were. So it was really, I felt like I got to work on, people love the first Phantasm, the second's got some interesting things, they use a different actor for the character, and then they bring him back
for the third.
Michael Baldwin, they bring him back for the third, which was great. But anyway, I'm probably prejudiced because I worked on it, but I think the third one's the best one in the series, and at least for the
first
effects.
one is so hokey.
Well,
but it's in the time.
If that was the first thing you saw, it's near to your heart. But making Reggie the star, and then Angus Scrimm was such a great guy, wonderful gentleman to hang out with and talk to. I learned a lot about him. How he was known for writing liner notes for classical music and stuff. He had quite a career doing that, and And of course, the people in the Phantasm. I mean, he's like the the god of horror movie actors. I mean, he's like Boris Karloff for today's audiences,
Right.
or at least back in the '80s. So, Phantasm 3, and then Maximum Overdrive. Was my first big thing, a big project, and it was a lot of fun. Maximum Overdrive was a lot of fun. Young crew, people just they just brought their A game,
And it shows.
and working for De Laurentiis, he brought in lots of folks from Italy and England. So I got the chance not only later to learn from like the Dick Smith New York kind of style, and later the Hollywood style, but I got to learn European techniques.
Oh, wow.
And worked with Carlo Rambaldi on the King Kong Lives, and now here's an interesting thing. At the time, there was no IMDb, no social media, no nothing. So unless you're working with someone, unless you knew what they worked on 20, 30 years ago,
It was a bit of a networking thing.
it was an enigma thing. Unless someone said to you, oh, hey, by the way, I worked with Mario Bava on Black Sabbath or Danger Diabolique. I mean, if you didn't know that, you're like, oh, okay, and Mario Bava's like, I mean, I remember watching his films as a kid. I didn't know, always Planet of the Vampires, Hercules in the Underworld, Danger Diabolique, and all these things. And I thought, man, there's a vibe. This guy's movies is so unique,
Right.
so crazy. And Black Sabbath, and Black Sunday, Barbara Steele. So I remember working with Rambaldi, and I didn't know that he had worked on those movies. I mean, I just, I knew, okay, he did the King Kong in '76 or '75 with Jessica Lange, and then I'm working on the King Kong now in 86. And I know he did E.T. and he did the mouth sticking out in Alien, and he did the White Buffalo. I mean, but I didn't really realize he'd had this big career in Italy. I mean, I knew he did, but I just didn't know.
It just doesn't sink in.
And then I worked with people there that a lot of the crews, they worked on James Bond films. I mean, Alec Mills, our director of photography on King Kong Lives, who later went on to be the director of photography on some of the Timothy Dalton James Bond pictures. He was a camera operator working on on Her Majesty's Secret Service, and I was just blown away. I mean, because that was one of my favorite Bond movies. And then I didn't realize that the guy driving the Happy Toys truck, Kerry Lofton, drove the truck in Duel with Dennis Hopper.
Really?
Yeah, and I mean,
Damn.
I mean,
I didn't even know that.
I didn't know. I mean, he was one of the. They had several people there, but he was kind of the master of driving big rigs.
Big rigs.
That's what his wife said.
So, I got to let you go here momentarily, but what do you got coming up? What's on the palette?
In '95, which just sounds like ancient times, it was after I kind of wrapped up my career with makeup effects, I got into writing, directing, producing. I had a small production company in Virginia, and we did a ton of stuff for Home and Garden Television. I did commercials for Lowe's. I did commercials for Home Depot. I did commercials for attorneys. So I got to get back into my idea of writing, directing, producing small productions. I directed a couple of features. And in the last several years, I've been back to my writing. I'm trying to up my writing game, and been working with some high-end writing groups of trying to get some horror projects out there. I produced a small sci-fi movie 2 years ago called Angel, and we're finishing up the visual effects on that. It's a really wonderful little, a lot of great actors, nice little sweet picture, not
Right.
or anything, but it was a fun picture to work on. So I do that. I still have guys call me back to do sculptures. I just did a sculpture for Disney, the cartoon Moana, the little Hey character, the little chicken.
Yeah.
They're doing a float for one of the Disney parades. It was just before COVID hit, and they have little Hey going around the boat in his little bucket, and you usually have to do study models. So I did a study model sculpture of Hey and did them all in parts and pieces so they can mold it and then make the actual Hey out of colored silicone and make him come up and scream and look at everybody and all that. So all those animatronics had to be sculpted first. Then I worked on the promo for the recent Twilight Zone reboot with Jordan Peele. We did ads for Twitter that were based on the old Rod Serling look of bare landscapes and like Salvador Dali, airplanes stuck in the sand, or people coming out of subway entrances out of the desert, and I sculpted this giant head that stairways, like his little figures are walking up into the mine, and it says expand your mind. So it's fun to get back involved in a few things like that. So
Spectacular. I love Twilight Zone so much. Big Twilight Zone fan. The Dean's already heard me go endlessly about Twilight Zone and how awesome Rod Serling was. Yeah, he was just such a prolific writer, and how he did all that stuff in the trenches during the war, writing Twilight Zone and Planet of the Apes, and just that stuff.
What was great was recently I started reading or listening to audiobooks, someone else reading to me, all the great classic sci-fi. So I did Dune, I did the Foundation series, Isaac Asimov. I did The Moon is a Cruel Mistress, and Stranger in a Strange Land by Robert Heinlein. Well, one of the things that I listened to was when and I don't know what, the Society of Sci-Fi Writers, somewhere in the, I don't know, 60s or 70s, they started doing their annual awards. Well, they said, let's go back from like the early 1900s, so all the big sci-fi writers choose all your favorite inspirational short stories because mostly sci-fi was short stories, and the novels didn't come along till they started actually collecting the anthologies and making novelizations out of like the Martian Chronicles and all that. Those are a collection of short stories Bradbury did for all the magazines. They said, well, go back, get all the classic stories and put them in the thing, and we'll put that in a book. And they whittled it down to one story from every great writer and all things that influence people. And I was listening to those, I realized how many of them were made in the Twilight Zone episodes. They all came from that classic sci-fi stories of long ago. Even the arena from Star Trek with Kirk fighting the Gorgon or whatever, that they wrote it, and then the research department said, this is very much like a guy that wrote this story back, whatever, almost the same story. So let's just buy the rights and say that, we did it. We got the rights to it. And it was, it's amazing to hear how things come full circle on that.
It's true. Dean, I'm going to let you go. How do the people at home and around the world follow you or keep up with whatever new adventure you got going?
I'm on Facebook, and it's Dean Gates. You can see my smiling face, gray-haired old fart, looking out at you.
Hardly.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm on Facebook, and that really is best. You can get up with me there.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Hope you've had fun at Colorado Festival 4.
It has been a blast, and Smurf, thank you.
A pleasure.
All right.
There you go, folks. Give us a like, give us a share, follow Dean. In the meantime, run fast, laugh hard, and always be kind. Good night.